Okay, so we've kind of gone through some problems. We did again, we're still on lesson 7.1, day 2. We've already done the writing parabolas in standard form by completing the square right here, right? Remember that. But now what we're actually going to do is we want to actually write the equation of parabola from some given characteristics. So basically these problems are different in the sense that they're going to ask you to write an equation given some information. So in this case we have the focus and the vertex. We can go from there. So anyway, here we have this problem. So we have the focus and the vertex at 1 and -4. So let's see how we're going to solve this. Well, let's actually, how we want to approach this is, again, we kind of did this on the first day, but let's go ahead and end. So we want to figure out knowns and unknowns, right? What are my nodes and unknowns? What do I know here? Well, I know, again, the focus, I know the focus is h plus p k, right? And how do I know that? Well, I know from the formulas, if I go back over here, right? If I go back to my formula chart over here, I know that one of mine is h plus pk. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, how did you know that it was h plus pk? Didn't we have that other formula? And in fact, we did it in the last problem, didn't we? Where, in this case, we used, the focus was hk plus p. And remember, the focus that we use depends on whether or not the graph opens up, or does it open up or down, or does it open up side to side. And so what we want to do here is, the way I like to determine that is actually graph it out. So let's say, okay, the focus is at 3, so 1, 2, 3, and then -4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So about right there. And our vertex is at 1, -4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, so right there. Well, if we think about it, if this is the vertex, and this is the focus, and we know that the focus has to actually be eating up, right? It has to be eating up the focus, right? And the vertex is just a part of the parabola. We know that it has to look something like that, right? And so because of that, we know that this is the equation we're going to have to use or make this into is the sideways opening parabola. And so that's why we use this focus formula. And so anyway, so we know the focus is h plus pk. So we're going to set that equal to the numbers 3 and -4. Because that's what the focus is given to us in the problem. And so what we do now is we say, okay, well, now we at least know that h plus p is equal to 3, and that k has to be equal to -4. We know those two pieces of information. We also know that the vertex, is hk. It's always hk. We don't have to worry about what side it opens to. So that gives us 1, -4. And so that's great. Whenever we get the vertex, we jump for joy because now we automatically know what h is. We know it's 1 and we know that that is -4. And using this information, right, we know that h and we know that k is equal to -4. We can use this information to say, hey, let's plug h into this and figure out what p is. So we do that. So I guess we can make another step out of this, huh? We say, use what you know to figure out unknowns, right? We can say that's a step. And so h plus p, so we have h, we know that's 1 plus p is equal to 3. And we just subtract 1 from both sides here, and we get that p is equal to 2. So we have all the pieces of information we need to make our equation. And so from that step, we make the equation, right? Make the equation. And so from that step, what we're going to do is we say, okay, well, the equation of a sideways opening parabola. Remember, we have if it's sideways opening, then that's going to imply that the y is on the left side getting squared, so it's going to be y. So remember, y is always going to be attached to k. So another thing, again, to remember is that the formula normally is, let me actually write it out just so we can kind of see it. K is equal to 4p h minus. Okay, so again, if there's a negative here in the formula, and there's a negative on the h, or sorry, on the k, there's a negative 4 here, be a little more clear about that, then that means that this is actually going to be y plus 4 squared. Y plus 4 squared. Of course, we have 4p, we fill that in 2. And then, of course, x minus h is 1. So the only thing we have left to do is multiply that out right there, so we get y plus 4 is equal to 8x minus 1. And that was squared, and we are done. And that is the problem that we needed to do. Okay, so on the next page, you'll notice there is a problem that's similar to that, a one here, number C actually. So what I would suggest you do is actually go ahead and run through this one, running through the same sort of model that I just did, and we can actually come back and talk about that. So let's go ahead and work through that, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Okay, so I'm going to make the assumption that you've paused the video and that you've kind of run through this problem again. So I won't do the explicit steps, but I'll kind of go as if and say the steps that I want to do. So again, my first step, of course, is find my knowns and unknowns. So again, I know, so first again we want to identify what the orientation of the parabola is. We say that the focus is 6, so let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We ran off. Let's do it in twos. 2, 4, 6. And so then we can make the y-axis as in ones. That's fine. So it's right there. That's our vertex. Or sorry, that's our focus, isn't it? And our vertex is at the same spot, but it is at -1. And again, remember, the vertex is like eating up the focus. So because of that, we know our parabola is upward shaped. So we're going to want to use the form x minus h squared is equal to 4p y minus k. Alright, so we want to use that form. Okay, so again, we know that the focus is going to be h plus p, right? We know the focus is h plus p, k. Oh, sorry. I made a boo-boo there, didn't I? Focus is actually, remember, because it's upward sloping, we need it the other way, right? We have to actually have h will be by itself, and we have k plus p. So I did that to demonstrate a common error. So don't do that. Don't do that, because that's a common error that people will frequently make. And of course we know that's equal to -6 and 2. So that gives us the information that h is equal to -6 and that k plus p is equal to 2. For my vertex, again remember, we can rejoice because the vertex is just h and k. So we've pretty much just been given what h and k are here. So we know that h is equal to -6 and that k is equal to -1. We can just plug that k in here to solve for p, so we get -1 plus p is equal to 2. Add 1 to both sides, that gives us that p is equal to 3. And we got all the information we need. So h minus k, again negative, so it has to be +6 squared is equal to 4p. Let's just do it in our heads. 4 times 3, that's going to be 12. And then y minus, or again, if it's minus, we have to do an addition sign. And there we have our equation for that problem. Okay, so what I'd like to do next is let's go through a different type of problem where you'll have to write an equation. And this one actually is kind of strange. This one says This one says, what if you have the focus? What if you know the direction that it's going and you know that it contains a certain point? Let's look what happens in that scenario. So, we know a few things. Because it opens downward, we automatically know that tells us what formulas that we need to use, right? So that gives us, we know that the focus again, we know the focus is, I'll write it again, because it opens downward, we're going to use the other formula. We're not going to use this one, we're going to use the x, right? Or sorry, we're going to be doing the x minus h squared is equal to 4p y minus k. That's the formula we want to use because it opens downward. So because of that, our focus is going to be h and then k plus p. And so that gives us that our focus is -3, -4. So again, we're finding our knowns and unknowns here. So h is equal to -3, and k plus p is equal to -4. So we have that information there. Okay, well, how do we find the other stuff? How do we figure out what the other stuff is here? And so what we can do is, let's actually go ahead and write out this formula given the information we know. So we have that h, so we have that it's -3, again we have to put the positive squared. It's equal to 4p y minus k. So the only thing we really filled in is that part right there. And so what we want to do in this problem is figure out how to get rid of either p or k in this equation, right? So I just have it in terms of one of the variables, and so I can solve it. Well, I know it contains, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this information here. Is I'm going to say it contains the point 5 and -10, meaning this is 5 is x, and of course this y is y. And so I'm going to fill that into this equation. So 5 plus 3 squared is equal to 4p, y is -10 in this case. Now, instead of putting k, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use this right here, this information that I just had, and I'm going to say k plus p is equal to -4. But I want to replace the k with just p so I can solve for what p is. So let's get k by itself, so we subtract p. And that gives us that k is equal to -4 minus p. Now what does that all mean? That means rather than writing -k here, we're going to write negative parentheses -4 minus p. We've just simply replaced the k there with a p. Okay, so we solve this. 5 plus 3 is of course 8. So that's going to be 8 squared, which is 64. That's going to be equal to 4p -10. Let's go ahead and so minus, we distribute the negative, so that's going to be plus 4, and we distribute that negative, so plus p. So there's a few options we have here. I personally would probably no, I guess you can't divide the 4, can you? Oh well. So or can you? Let's see. Times 10. And anyway, let's see here. Actually, I think, yeah, let's do that. So as you can see here, we have a 64. So let's divide by the 4 to get rid of that. So of course 64 divided by 4 is going to be 16. So we get 16 is equal to p. -10 plus 4 obviously is -6 plus p, right? So we get something like that looks like that. And of course what we can do is just go ahead and distribute this so we get 16 equals negative 6p plus p squared. Now, we have another situation where we get, so we have a p squared and a p, so what we want to do is actually let's subtract 16 from both sides. So we get p squared minus 6p minus 16 equals 0. And what you probably, hopefully, noticed by now is that this is a quadratic form, right? It's quadratic. And so that's going to be a strange case because, okay, so if I say, okay, say, let's see, negative 16 and negative 6. So is there anything that would multiply negative 16, that would multiply to get negative 16, but would add to get to 6? Well, let's see, you have 4 and 4. No, that doesn't do it. You have 8 and 2. That would multiply, but, so, okay, so you need negative 8 and 2. So p minus 8, p plus 2, 0. And so we actually have two solutions here, don't we? We have that p could be 8 or p could be negative 2. Now, if you really think about it, it makes more sense for this 2 to be the case because it's probably not going to be the case that the distance between your focus and your vertex is going to be 8. That seems a little far-fetched to think of. So we're probably going to go with the 2. We actually can kind of illustrate why that is the case. Let's see if we look on the 1, 2, 3, 4 right there. It opens up and it contains the point. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2. That's going to be like way down here somewhere. So if this is the focus, the vertex is going to probably lie somewhere over here. It's going to look something. So actually, we can figure out the vertex, can't we? So let's see, k, so we plug negative 4 minus p, so p is minus 2. So minus minus, you add 6, and that gives us negative 2. And we have h, so our vertex, again, is h and k, so that's going to be negative 3 and negative 2. So that means our vertex is going to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So notice it is in fact 2 away. So because the vertex is here and the focus is here, again we want to eat the vertex wants to eat the focus. This is going to look something like that. And because that point has to be there, I can kind of include it. Obviously this is not the best graph, so but again we're asked to find what is the equation, right? What's the equation here? So we have k, we have h, we have p, we have everything we need. We can see that this is opening downward, so we're going to be using this. So we get h, x, minus, so remember we got to put the plus there, so plus 3 squared. And then of course we do for p, so we know p is negative 2, so negative 2 times 4 would be negative 8. And last but not least, y, which is going to be just y, duh, is going to be, let's see, minus k, where's k? Oh, there it is, negative 2, so we need plus 2. And that is the answer that we want.